You ever open something so fancy, so pristine, that your gut tells you it can't possibly be good news? That was me, standing in my kitchen, coffee in one hand, staring at this thick, cream-colored envelope like it might explode. Embossed gold lettering read, "New Beginnings, a celebration of freedom. Saturday at 7 p.m. Black tie optional. Cocktails and hors d'oeuvres to follow. No sender name, no return address. Just a date, a time, and a title that felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. It had her fingerprints all over it. Sophisticated, grandiose, theatrical in the way only someone desperate to convince the world she's fine could muster. My soon-to-be ex-wife, Emily, always did know how to put on a show. I opened it anyway. Inside was a gold-trimmed card with a printed message. Let us raise a glass to growth, to change, and to freedom. Join me in celebrating a new chapter. Life is too short not to live it fully. Emily. I laughed. A short, bitter sound that filled the quiet kitchen. Celebrating divorce like it was a goddamn promotion. I hadn't seen her in almost 3 weeks. Not since our last screaming match over who'd get the lake house, she did. And who'd pay the lawyer fees, I did. Now she was throwing a party, to announce it to the world like she'd just launched a startup. I tossed the invitation onto the counter like it burned. Are you going? A voice asked from behind. I turned. It was Claire, Emily's younger sister, leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, a knowing look on her face. She'd always had a way of showing up without a sound, like a shadow that had thoughts of its own. Messy ponytail, no makeup, a faded hoodie that said Smith College, class of 2014. She looked nothing like her sister. Claire wasn't made of sharp edges and polished smiles. She was soft curves and quiet rebellion. I didn't know you were stopping by, I said. I brought your French press back. She held it up like a trophy, then walked past me to the sink, rinsing it out like she belonged here. For a long time, she kind of did. She glanced at the invitation on the counter, then looked at me again. So, you going? Absolutely not. Claire let out a low whistle. That's going to go over well. You know she invited half the city, right? Every client, every donor, every friend you two ever had. She's going to stand up there in some overpriced dress, glass of champagne in hand, and tell everyone how you grew apart. Like it just happened one day, and she wasn't letting another man undress her in a hotel downtown. I froze. She told you. She didn't have to. Claire's jaw tensed. You think I don't know how she operates? This isn't about healing. It's about control. She wants to own the narrative before you even open your mouth. I hated how much sense that made. Let her, I said quietly. I'm not showing up to watch her perform. Claire stepped closer. Then don't go for her. Go for you. Show people you're still standing. Even if your heart's taped together and your pride's halfway out the door. The silence between us stretched. I don't know if I can, I admitted. I don't think I've got it in me to smile through a room of people whispering behind their cocktails. You don't have to smile, she said, and something in her tone softened. Just show up. That's enough. I looked at her then. Really looked at her. She was standing close now. Close enough that I caught the faint scent of her shampoo, coconut, and something floral. Claire had always been Emily's opposite in every way. More honest, more grounded, more real. She touched my arm lightly, then let her hand fall. For what it's worth, she said quietly, you were the best thing that ever happened to her. She just didn't know how to handle something real. Then she was gone, just like that. The door closed behind her with a click, and I was left alone with a fancy invitation and the growing realization that maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't need to show up. If only to remind myself that I still existed beyond the version of me Emily was going to spin into a soundbite. That night, I stood in my closet staring at a black suit I hadn't worn in 2 years. The last time was her gala, the one where she raised 6 figures for some foundation and smiled like a queen beside me. Back then, I thought we were unshakable. Turns out, I was just blind. I ran my hand over the fabric and sighed. Fine, I muttered. Let's give them a show. If Emily wanted a performance, maybe I'd give her one she'd never forget. The valet took my keys with a smirk, the kind of smirk that said, "You're not the first sad bastard I've seen pull up to one of these." I nodded curtly and adjusted the collar of my blazer. It was a warm evening, late spring in the city, where the sidewalks still held the sun's heat long after dusk. Emily had rented out the rooftop of the Callahan, One of those upscale boutique hotels with too much chrome and not enough soul. The elevator ride up was silent, my own reflection staring back at me from the polished gold walls. I looked good, I think. Shaved, suited, shoes shined. But under the surface, I was frayed. The doors opened with a soft chime, and I stepped into a world of laughter and clinking glasses. It was worse than I imagined. The place was packed, people everywhere, in tailored suits and flowing dresses, milling around with the kind of easy grace that comes from money and curated confidence. I recognized too many faces. Her coworkers, our mutual friends, a couple of people from the firm I hadn't spoken to since the separation began. All of them smiling like this was just another evening fundraiser. Like they hadn't all quietly taken her side already. The decorations were immaculate. Of course they were. Gold and white balloons formed elegant arcs over the bar. A massive floral installation spelled out the words "New Beginnings" in pink peonies and cream roses. It felt like walking into a Hallmark card wrapped around a divorce decree. I caught sight of her before she saw me. Emily. She stood at the far end of the rooftop, bathed in the amber glow of the string lights, surrounded by admirers. Her dress was pale lavender silk, hugging her in all the places I used to know intimately. Her hair was swept up, her laugh perfectly timed, her glass always full. She looked radiant, calculated, yes, but radiant. And it made me sick. A waiter offered me champagne. I waved him off and headed to the bar. Whiskey. Neat. You came. I turned to see Claire, perched on a stool like she owned the place. Black cocktail dress, leather jacket slung over the back of the chair, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. You look good, she said, her voice low. Not trying too hard good. Just solid. I feel like I'm being sacrificed to the gods of public relations. You kinda are. We clinked glasses. Hers was wine. Mine still whiskey. I drained it in one pull. You don't have to stay long, Claire said gently. Just enough to show her she doesn't get to write this whole story. But I was already watching Emily. She had a microphone now. A hush rippled through the crowd as someone dimmed the lights, and a spotlight turned toward her. She tapped the mic. Can everyone hear me? Polite laughter. I stepped back into the shadows, just close enough to see, far enough to not be seen. I just want to say thank you, she began. Thank you all for being here tonight, to celebrate something that, for me, has been both painful and beautiful, growth. My stomach tightened. Divorce, she said with a light chuckle, is a word that carries so much weight. But what if it didn't have to? What if it could be a door instead of a wall? What if it's not an end, but a beginning? The crowd murmured in agreement. Too many nods. Too many knowing smirks. She continued. When we started this journey, Ryan and I, we were young and in love. And for many years, we built a life I'll always be proud of. Started. Journey. Past tense. I could feel myself clenching. But, she said, voice rising slightly, sometimes we grow apart. Sometimes, the person you were is no longer the person you are. And rather than force something broken to keep pretending, we chose something braver. We chose truth. My glass was empty again. I signaled the bartender for another, but he was focused on the toast. I'm so grateful for the memories, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. But I'm even more excited for what comes next. So here's to new beginnings, to freedom, and to living life on your own terms. Applause. Cheers. A few people even raised their glasses like this was a wedding. I felt something inside me fracture. I turned and slipped through the crowd, weaving between laughing couples and soft jazz, until I found the balcony. The night air hit me like a wall of truth. Cool, quiet, honest in a way the party could never be. Below, the city buzzed, uncaring and loud, and that was comforting in its own way. I gripped the railing, trying to breathe. She had just erased me. Our marriage reduced to a polished anecdote in front of people who didn't know the late-night fights, the counseling sessions, the apologies that came too late, or not at all. She didn't mention the man she'd been fucking for 6 months before she even told me she was unhappy. She didn't talk about how I found the texts, how she cried and said, it wasn't serious, how she begged for time and then decided, in her words, it's better to just start fresh. Fresh. Like I was a stain on her record. The door opened behind me. Claire stepped out, a glass in each hand. Figured you'd be here, she said. She handed me a whiskey. I took it without a word. She rehearsed that speech for a week, she said softly. Tried it out on me twice. I told her it sounded fake. It was fake, I said. But they loved it. Claire leaned on the railing beside me. She's good at that, making people love the version of her she wants them to see. Meanwhile, I'm just the guy in the background. The guy she outgrew. She turned to me. No, you're the guy who stayed. The guy who fought. That counts for more than you think. I didn't respond. Just stared out into the night, the glass heavy in my hand. She placed hers down and rested her chin on her arm, watching me carefully. She may have given up, Claire said quietly, but you didn't. That's what people are going to remember. Not the flowers. Not the speeches. I looked at her then. Really looked. Her eyes didn't flinch. She wasn't trying to fix me. Just sit with me while I broke. I didn't know it yet, but something changed in that moment. Not everything. Not enough to make sense of anything. But something shifted. A spark. A whisper. Something waiting in the dark. The fireworks started just after 10. I was still on the balcony, the second whiskey glass nearly empty, watching the first gold bloom crack open above the skyline. The sky lit up like it was celebrating something worth remembering. In truth, the only thing worth remembering about the night so far was how fake everything had felt. Behind me, the music thumped back to life. People were laughing again, dancing now, clinking their glasses like they'd just survived something instead of watched a woman publicly erase a man from her life. I stayed in the shadows, maybe 10, 15 feet from the door. Just enough light from the overhead bulbs to cast a golden edge on the railing, but I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be asked how I was doing or what I thought about Emily's beautiful speech. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted silence. Another explosion overhead, red this time, then white. The sky shimmered. You're a hard man to find. The voice was soft, low, familiar. Claire. She didn't ask for permission. Just stepped through the door like she'd done it 100 times before, heels clicking softly on the wooden boards, a glass of wine still in her hand. I figured you might be hiding out here. I didn't respond. Just sipped from my glass. She leaned against the railing beside me, watching the colors dance across the sky. The lights caught her face, and for a moment, she looked younger. Not Emily's polished reflection, but something more human, more flawed, more real. I used to love fireworks, she said. When I was a kid, I thought they were magic. Now they just feel loud. That made me laugh, the first real one in days. Short, dry, but it cracked something open. Claire turned, her profile silhouetted by the next burst of light. Emily's speech, she said, was rehearsed. I told her it felt like a TED Talk wrapped in emotional detachment. She always did have a way with PR. Claire nodded, her smile sad. You know, I used to envy you too. I turned. Seriously? Yeah, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. You were the one guy I ever saw Emily soften around. You brought out something in her I didn't think existed. Or maybe she just hid it well. She stopped softening a long time ago. Claire looked at me then, and there was something in her eyes, something raw. I know. A pause. Just long enough for silence to stretch, but not long enough to become awkward. She was cruel to you, Claire said. Not just lately. For years. You didn't deserve that. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I didn't. The truth was, hearing someone say it out loud made it feel too real. Claire stepped closer. Not much. Just enough to close the space that had always existed between us. Space filled with polite distance and 1,000 unsaid things. I always thought, she started, voice softer now, that if Emily ever let you go, it would destroy you. I turned, not sure if I should feel offended or understood. But, she continued, here you are. Still standing. Still dignified. That takes strength. I exhaled slow. It doesn't feel like strength. Because it's not loud. Real strength rarely is. Another firework exploded, this time closer, blue and gold showering across the skyline like rain. Claire's face lit up for a moment, and I saw her eyes, wide, unguarded, and locked on mine. You were always kind to me, she said suddenly, even when I didn't deserve it. You always deserved kindness, Claire. She smiled at that, a real smile, not the tight, practiced kind Emily wore like armor. This one was softer, warmer, laced with something unspoken. The space between us shifted again, narrowed. She took a small step toward me. I felt it. That pull. That magnetic tension that shouldn't be there, but undeniably was. I hadn't noticed it before. Or maybe I had and buried it. For years, Claire had been the background to our life. Always there, always watching, always quiet. But now, with the weight of Emily's absence pressing down, Claire was no longer background. She was light in the dark. And then she said it. I never agreed with how she treated you. My chest tightened. She used your loyalty like it was a leash, Claire said. And I hated watching it. The glass in her hand lowered. Her eyes searched mine, uncertain but unafraid. I used to wonder what it would have been like, she whispered, if I had met you first. The breath caught in my throat. The fireworks burst again, louder now. Closer. But they might as well have been a mile away. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words were too much, too sudden, and yet exactly what I hadn't allowed myself to think. Until now. Her hand brushed mine. Not by accident. Slow. Deliberate. Testing. I didn't pull away. Claire. I started. I know, she whispered. This is crazy. And messy. And maybe wrong. Her fingers interlaced with mine. But it doesn't feel wrong, she added. The air was thick between us. Heavy with implication. My heart beat like it hadn't in months. Too fast. Too loud. Too alive. She looked up at me. Eyes wide. Lips parted just slightly. And I did something I hadn't done in years. I leaned in. Her lips met mine halfway. It was soft. Hesitant at first. But then something inside both of us cracked wide open. The kiss deepened. Slow but filled with years of words neither of us had ever said. It wasn't about revenge. Or loneliness. Or desperation. It was something else. Need. When we finally broke apart, her breath was shaky. I shouldn't have done that, she whispered. Then why does it feel like the first real thing that's happened to me in a long time? She didn't answer. She just stood there, lips swollen, eyes filled with something between regret and wonder. And then she turned and walked back inside, leaving me alone under a sky still exploding with light. But somehow, finally, I didn't feel so completely in the dark. I woke up with the dull ache of too much whiskey and too many thoughts. The guest room was still, the only light coming through the narrow window above the dresser. The house was quiet in that way only early mornings can be, before reality barges in with texts and phone calls and the guilt that follows you like a second skin. I stared at the ceiling. Did I dream it? That kiss. Claire's lips. The taste of red wine and recklessness. The softness of her hand in mine. No, it was real. Burned into me like a brand. I sat up slowly, every part of me sore. Not from anything physical, just the weight of what that moment meant. I ran a hand over my face. My mouth still felt like hers had been there. My skin still buzzed with the memory of her leaning in, the quiet desperation in her whisper, the sudden clarity in her kiss. Claire, Emily's sister. I rubbed my temples. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't plan for it. Hell, I didn't even see it coming. But now that it had, now that it was in the air between us, I couldn't unfeel it. I didn't know what that said about me, or her, or the marriage I'd barely buried. I wandered downstairs. The smell of stale alcohol and leftover perfume clung to the living room. Someone had left a half-empty wine glass on the console table, probably Claire. My mouth was dry. My head, worse. I poured myself a glass of water and downed it like it owed me something. The clock on the oven blinked 7:42. Too early to think. Too late to pretend last night didn't happen. Footsteps creaked on the stairs behind me, and my whole body tensed. I didn't turn right away. I wasn't ready to see her again. Claire stepped into the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of Emily's old hoodies and a pair of leggings. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, her eyes still puffy from sleep. She froze when she saw me. For a second, neither of us said a word. Morning, I finally offered. She nodded, cautiously. Hey. Her voice was quieter than last night. Not embarrassed exactly, but different. Measured. I handed her a mug and gestured toward the coffee pot. She poured. I waited. The silence was deafening. About a minute passed before she spoke. So, about last night. Yeah. She didn't meet my eyes. I was drunk. And emotional. And I definitely crossed a line. You weren't the only one. Claire sighed, pressing the mug to her lips without drinking. We kissed. We did. And now it's awkward. Only if we let it be. She looked up at that. Her gaze was heavy, searching. Do you regret it? I thought about lying. About saying yes just to keep the balance. But I couldn't. No. She exhaled through her nose. Me neither. That changed something. The tension didn't vanish, but it softened. Like we'd both acknowledged the impossible and weren't sure whether to be afraid or relieved. Claire leaned against the counter, arms crossed over her chest. "It's not just about last night," she said. I think I've felt something for a long time. I just buried it." I blinked. "Since when?" She looked away. "Years." That hit me harder than I expected. "All those holidays," she said, laughing bitterly. "All those dinners and parties and late-night talks on the porch while she was off somewhere doing God knows what. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was just being protective. But I wanted you to see me." I was stunned, not because I didn't believe her, but because deep down, some part of me had seen her. I just hadn't let myself look too closely. Not while I was still trying to fix something that was never going to hold together. I walked over slowly. Claire straightened, her breath catching slightly. "I don't know what this is," I said, "or what it means. But last night felt different. It didn't feel like a mistake." "No," she whispered. "It didn't." We stood there for a beat too long, and then she stepped back. "I need to clear my head," she said. "Take a walk. Think." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She grabbed her phone from the counter and slipped on a pair of sandals. At the door, she paused. "I'm not running away," she added. "Just breathing." And with that, she was gone. The door clicked shut, and I was alone again. But not in the same way I'd been before. Because now, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. Full of questions I didn't have answers to. Full of feelings that had been quietly growing like roots under a cracked foundation. I looked at the couch, then at the staircase, then out the window to where Claire had disappeared around the corner. And I realized, for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Emily. Not her perfume, not her laugh, not even her betrayal. I was thinking about Claire, about her mouth, her voice, her truth, and it terrified me just how much I wanted to hear more of it. By Monday, everything felt like it had been thrown into a blender. Emily called that morning, not to apologize, not to ask how I was doing after her little one-woman show. No, she wanted to check in about the divorce paperwork. She always had perfect timing. "I just want to make sure we're still aligned on tone," she said, voice crisp, professional, like we were collaborating on a press release and not dismantling 17 years of our life together. "Tone?" I asked. "Yeah, amicable, clean, quiet." I said nothing. She took my silence as agreement and pushed ahead. "I've been thinking," she continued. "If you keep things civil, we can probably finalize without court. Just signatures and done. Less mess, less attention, and I'll even drop the equity claim on the cabin." Oh, there it was. A carrot tied to a muzzle. "You mean if I stay quiet," I said flatly, "you'll let me keep the place I renovated with my own hands?" Emily sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It's not like that, Ryan. It's exactly like that." She paused, then softened her tone, laced it with faux sympathy. "Look, I know this is hard for you, but we both knew we weren't working." "No, you knew." I was still trying, but I didn't say it. I was done giving her more truth than she deserved. "I'll have my lawyer review the new draft," I said, and hung up before she could pivot into another monologue about self-growth. I sat there on the edge of the bed, phone still in hand, head buzzing. My thoughts drifted, not to Emily this time, but to Claire. It had been 2 days since the kiss. 1 day since our awkward but honest coffee in the kitchen. Since then, silence. She hadn't texted, hadn't called, not even a meme. And Claire loved memes. I told myself not to overthink it. She needed space. We both did. But that didn't stop me from staring at my screen every couple hours, wondering if I should reach out. Just as I started typing out a message, "Hey, can we talk?" another notification came in. "Claire, can we talk? Coffee. Same place? Today? 4? My stomach flipped in a way I wasn't used to anymore. A kind of nervous anticipation that felt absurd for someone I'd technically known over a decade. But it was different now. She was different. We were different. At 3:56, I was already seated. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and an antique shop Claire used to drag Emily into when they were kids. Now it was hers. She came here almost every Saturday morning, sometimes Sunday afternoons. I remembered those details, not because I meant to, but because you remember small things about people who make you feel something, even when you're not supposed to. She arrived right at 4, wearing a black sweater and jeans, her hair still damp from a shower. No makeup. She didn't need it. She spotted me, gave a small smile, and walked over. "Hey," I said, standing halfway. "Hey," she returned, voice soft. Thanks for meeting. We ordered coffees, hers an oat milk latte, mine black, and sat in the back, where the windows let in golden light from the late afternoon sun. She stirred her drink, staring into it like it held answers. I've been avoiding this, she said, because I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I. Claire looked up. But you felt it too, right? That night. On the balcony. I met her gaze. Yeah, I did. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, like she needed confirmation she wasn't crazy. I've been thinking a lot about you, she said. Not just since the kiss. Before that. For a long time. I've thought about you too, I admitted. But I buried it. You were always Emily's sister. I couldn't even let myself consider it. And now I don't know what the rules are anymore. She laughed lightly. I don't think there are rules. We sipped in silence. Then she leaned forward, voice lower. When Emily started pulling away from you, I watched it happen. You'd reach for her hand, and she'd pretend not to notice. You'd ask about her day, and she'd give you 2 words and change the subject. I saw it and wanted to scream. I blinked. Why didn't you? Because I thought it wasn't my place. And because I didn't trust myself not to make it about me. She looked down, fidgeting with her sleeve. I felt things for you, Ryan. Real ones. Even when I didn't want to. I hated seeing you hurt. And somewhere along the line, that turned into something else. There was nothing performative in her voice. No drama. Just raw, quiet honesty. I'm not ready, I said finally, for a new relationship. I don't think either of us is. I know, she nodded. But I also don't want to pretend that kiss didn't mean anything. It meant everything, she said. The sunlight shifted across her face, and I felt that same tug in my chest. Not lust, not desperation, just gravity. I reached across the table, brushed her fingers with mine. She didn't pull away. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. The space between us was filled with possibility, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I left the cafe feeling more grounded than I had in months. Of course, the universe couldn't let that last. Because later that night, as I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed again. Emily. A voicemail. I played it. Hey, I've been thinking. Maybe we should talk in person. About how we end this. Properly. There was a pause. Then a soft, breathy chuckle. I know you. You're not built for casual endings. And just like that, everything tangled again. Because Claire had shown me what something new could feel like. But Emily? She was still trying to shape the ending into something she could control. I sat there in the driveway, listening to the last seconds of the voicemail, knowing that whatever came next, it wouldn't be simple. And it definitely wouldn't be quiet. The next morning, I dreamed of Claire. Not just her lips, though that was part of it, but her laugh, too. That half-choked little snort she let slip when something actually caught her off guard. The way her hair curled slightly at the ends when it dried naturally. The way her hand had lingered over mine at the cafe. Her honesty. Her fire. Her restraint. I woke up feeling like I was wrapped in someone else's life. Like I'd cracked open a sealed box I wasn't supposed to touch. By the time I got to the kitchen, sunlight was streaming through the blinds, and the weight of reality returned like a dull ache in the chest. I poured coffee, stared into the cup like it might answer something for me. It didn't. Claire hadn't texted. Neither had Emily. And yet both of them were everywhere, in my thoughts, in my pulse, in every decision I didn't want to make yet. The truth was, Claire and I hadn't crossed a line physically, not really. One kiss, one moment. But emotionally, we'd blown past every exit. I kept telling myself we were grown adults, capable of deciding who we wanted to be with. But logic didn't soften the edges of guilt. Not when you've spent years being a good man to the wrong woman. Not when you're falling for the one person you were never supposed to see this way. Midday, my phone buzzed. Claire, can I come by? I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't want her to, but because I needed to figure out how I was going to look her in the eye and not ask to kiss her again. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find her standing there in a white sundress, a denim jacket slung over one arm, her other hand clutching a folded piece of paper. She looked unsure, not the confident, clever Claire I'd kissed on a balcony. This was her quieter version, the one that carried more weight in her eyes. Hey, I said softly. Hey. She looked past me, into the house. Can I come in? Yeah, of course. She stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind her. I led her to the living room. She didn't sit, just stood there, holding the paper between her fingers like it was burning through her skin. I talked to her, she said. I didn't need to ask who. Emily. When? I asked. Last night. After your call, I couldn't stop thinking. About us. About her. I needed to face it before this becomes something real. My heart rate picked up. What did she say? Claire let out a breath. She asked if I was trying to win. Like you were some trophy in a divorce court. I scoffed. Of course she did. Claire's voice tightened. She said it would destroy the family dynamic if I pursued anything with you. That I'd be breaking some unspoken code. That sisters don't do this to each other. She did far worse to you. Claire nodded. I told her that. I reminded her of all the ways she shut me out, all the times she used people like pieces on a board. She didn't like hearing it. And you? I asked quietly. What do you think? Claire finally unfolded the paper in her hand and handed it to me. It was a letter, short, handwritten in her familiar script. I read it. Dear Emily, I love you. I always will. But I won't lie anymore. I've spent too many years holding my tongue to keep the peace. I saw how you treated Ryan. I saw how he kept showing up, even when you stopped caring. I didn't plan this. I didn't hope for it. But I'm not sorry it happened. He deserves honesty. And so do I. If you can't accept that, I understand. But I won't apologize for feeling something real. Claire. I lowered the letter, my chest tight. You gave her this? Claire nodded. Last night. Left it at her place when she wouldn't stop talking long enough to actually listen. Silence filled the space between us like fog. I don't want to sneak around, she said. I'm done hiding things to protect other people's versions of me. I stepped closer. I don't want to be a secret either. She looked up at me, her eyes raw. Then let's not be. I reached out, took her hand. She let me. We stood there for a long moment, just breathing in the weight of the choice we'd made. And then she kissed me. Not tentative this time. It was need. Permission. 1,000 buried things finally finding the air. Her fingers slid into my hair, my hands rested on her waist, and we didn't rush. We just let it happen. Quiet. Soft. Slow. When we finally broke apart, I rested my forehead against hers. This is going to be complicated, I murmured. She smiled. Eyes still closed. All the best things are. We didn't say this is the start of something. We didn't call it a relationship. Not yet. But something had shifted. There were no more lines to cross. We'd already jumped. And now, we were falling. It started with a text. Not one of those flirty, emoji-filled messages that people send when they're trying to be coy. No, Claire didn't do coy. Claire, are you going to Melissa's thing tonight? Me? I wasn't planning on it. Claire, she invited me to. I said yes. Might be easier if we both show up. Me? You mean easier for the rumors, or easier for you? Claire, easier for both of us to not be. Whatever this weird thing is, let's be in the same room without the weight. That last sentence hit harder than I expected. We were still figuring out what this was, what we were, but we hadn't yet learned how to exist in public as whatever we were becoming. Not quite friends. Not quite lovers. Definitely not ex-brother-in-law and sister-in-law. We'd crossed too far for titles to make sense anymore. So I went. I wasn't dressed for war, but I felt like I was walking into one. Melissa's event was a small gathering at her townhome, a mix of mutual friends, colleagues, and a few people I didn't recognize. She called it a spring soiree, which really just meant wine, overpriced charcuterie, and conversations steeped in suburban politeness. Claire arrived 30 minutes after I did. When she walked in, everything in the room shifted. Not visibly, not loudly, but I felt it. She wore a deep green dress that hugged her in all the right places. Her hair was down, wavy, and her eyes met mine like we'd agreed on something without speaking. She didn't come straight to me. We stayed on opposite ends of the room at first. She talked to Melissa and a woman I vaguely recognized from yoga or book club or something. I lingered near the drinks with a guy from my office, half listening to a conversation about interest rates. And then Claire excused herself from her group and walked toward me. I could feel every eye in the room shift slightly. It wasn't that anyone knew. It was that people felt. Hey, she said, her voice low, like we weren't surrounded by people sipping Sauvignon Blanc and pretending not to eavesdrop. Hey, you okay? She asked. I am now. She smiled, lips twitching into something that said careful and come closer all at once. We didn't touch, but we stood just close enough to make it noticeable. You want to get out of here? I asked. Soon, she said. Let me make one more round. I watched her float through the room, composed, graceful, just the right amount of charm. And for the first time, I didn't see Emily's younger sister. I saw Claire as her own person, and she saw me as more than her sister's ex. 15 minutes later, we left together. No goodbyes. No explanations. We didn't go to my place or hers. We ended up in my car, parked outside a quiet little park near the river, the city lights glittering in the distance. It was supposed to be just a talk. But when I turned to her, and she looked at me, there was no more pretending. We kissed again. Deeper. Longer. Not reckless, but not restrained, either. And then I opened the door, and she followed me out. We walked along the trail in silence until we found a bench near the water. The night air was warm, soft with the scent of honeysuckle and something electric. She sat. I sat beside her. Our hands brushed. I haven't done this in a long time, she said. What? Made out like teenagers in a park. She laughed. No. Let someone get this close. I turned to face her fully. You're not afraid? I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'm more afraid of waking up a year from now and wondering why I let fear win. We kissed again, slower this time. My hand moved to her knee, then to her thigh, and when her fingers slid under my shirt and across my stomach, I forgot how to breathe. We didn't go all the way, but it was close. Close enough that when I dropped her off at her place later, her dress was wrinkled and her lips were pink from kisses and her voice was hushed. You sure you want this? I asked as she got out. She turned back. I've never been more sure of anything. Then she closed the door. And for the first time since my marriage imploded, I didn't feel broken. I felt wanted. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because someone had chosen me. For who I was now. Not who I used to be. I drove home in silence, hands still tingling from her touch. The line we'd tiptoed around for weeks? We didn't cross it. We erased it. And neither of us looked back. The fallout didn't come immediately. There was a strange, quiet week that followed. That illusion of calm before the detonation. Claire and I didn't label what we were doing, but we saw each other more than we didn't. Coffee, long walks, late-night conversations on my porch that ended with her head on my shoulder, fingers lazily tracing the back of my hand. It felt unreal, like something borrowed from another life. But peace doesn't last long when there's a history like ours trailing behind. I should have seen it coming. It started with a phone call. Not from Emily. From Melissa. She didn't even say hello. Just launched into it. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. I paused. Okay. Are you seeing Claire? I hesitated. That half-second of silence was enough. Jesus, Ryan, she muttered. You are. I sat down. Who told you? Someone saw you. At the park. Saturday night. You two weren't exactly subtle. Damn. I should have known. We didn't mean for this to get messy, I said. Oh, it's messy, she snapped. You think people are going to just let this slide? Claire is Emily's sister. Do you know how this looks? Yes. I knew exactly how it looked. I care about her, I said simply. Melissa sighed. You're not the villain here. But Ryan. This is going to explode. She was right. 2 hours later, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen since the night of her toast. Emily. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave one. Instead, she showed up. I was in the kitchen when I heard the knock. Sharp. Demanding. I opened the door, and there she was. Flawless. Furious. And carrying a storm behind her eyes. Really? She snapped. Claire? Claire? I didn't answer. Just stepped aside and let her in. She paced immediately, arms crossed tight across her chest. I thought maybe you'd go sleep around. Maybe try and reclaim your manhood or whatever sad midlife crisis you're spiraling through. But Claire? Stop, I said. Calm. Too calm. Don't you dare tell me to stop, she hissed. That's my sister. She's also her own person. Emily's laugh was hollow. Don't give me that. You think this is about her freedom? This is you sticking it to me, punishing me for leaving you. I blinked. You cheated on me, Emily. Her jaw tightened. That has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with it, I said. You ended this long before we signed papers. And Claire didn't swoop in. She showed up. Her face twisted. You really think this makes you look strong? Like some broken man rebuilt by the younger sister of the woman who dumped him? I stepped closer. I'm not trying to look strong, I said. I'm just done pretending. Emily's anger faltered for a second. Just a flicker of something beneath the surface. Regret? Jealousy? I wasn't sure. But it was there. You're embarrassing yourself, she said, weaker now. No, I replied. I was embarrassing myself. For years. Trying to hold on to a woman who let go long before I did. She shook her head. You've just ruined everything. Everything you wanted to control, maybe. She didn't speak again. Just turned, yanked the door open, and left. No slamming. No screaming. Just silence. Which, somehow, was worse. Within hours, the whispers started. I got a text from my cousin in Chicago. Heard you're dating your ex's sister? Damn. Then a client. Hope the rumors aren't true. Could hurt optics. Even my boss asked for a casual lunch that week. Code for fix your shit before it affects the firm. Claire was taking the heat too. Her parents called. Her mother cried. Her father said he was disappointed but not surprised. Apparently, Emily had made her calls early. But through it all, Claire stayed close. She didn't backpedal. She didn't run. One night, as we lay on the couch, tangled in silence, she looked up at me and whispered, "Do you regret it?" I looked at her flushed cheeks, her tired eyes, the way she curled her toes into the edge of the blanket like she was bracing for rejection. No, I said, not even a little. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. This is going to get worse before it gets better, she said. I know, but you're in this. Fully. She reached up, brushed her fingers against my cheek. Then we fight, she whispered. For us. And I kissed her like I had something worth protecting. Because I did. The first time I saw my name on a local gossip blog, I laughed. Out loud. Alone. In my kitchen. High-profile local divorce takes a twisted turn. Ex-husband linked to wife's younger sister. The photo was grainy, taken from a distance. Claire and I walking out of a bookstore, coffee in hand, our fingers laced together. Nothing scandalous. Nothing tabloid-worthy. But the caption said it all. New couple, or old betrayal? I didn't laugh long. Because once it was out there, it spread. Fast. Text messages flooded in. Old friends. College buddies. 2 clients. Even my high school biology teacher, of all people. The narrative wasn't complicated. They didn't care that Emily cheated first. That Claire and I found each other long after the marriage was dead. They just saw what they wanted to see. Man leaves wife, hooks up with sister. It made people feel better to assume I was the villain. Simpler. Cleaner. My firm asked me to take a personal break. They called it a mutual decision, but I didn't miss the subtext. Claire got dropped from a small design contract she'd just landed 2 weeks prior. No explanation, just a vague email about reputation concerns. And through it all, Emily stayed quiet. She didn't defend me, or Claire, but she didn't deny it either. Her silence was her weapon, and she wielded it like an artist. I kept waiting for Claire to say enough was enough. To tell me it wasn't worth it. That we should cool off until the noise died down. I wouldn't have blamed her. But she never did. Instead, she packed a bag and showed up on my doorstep with a pillow tucked under one arm and a duffel over the other. I figure, she said, stepping inside. If they're going to crucify us for being together, we might as well be together. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't romantic. It was real. The first night she stayed, she fell asleep with her head on my chest, her breath slow and even, and for the first time in weeks, my mind went quiet. The next morning, she made eggs. Burned them, actually. We ate them anyway. We found a rhythm. Not perfect. Not idyllic. But ours. She liked to read in bed. I liked to fall asleep to background noise. We compromised. Earbuds for me, soft lamp for her. She hated how I left dishes to soak. I hated how she left clothes draped over every chair. We argued. Then laughed. Then argued again. It was messy. It was real. But not everyone saw it that way. One afternoon, as we walked out of a cafe, a woman I didn't recognize sneered and muttered, "You should be ashamed of yourselves." Claire tensed. I turned, ready to say something. She stopped me with a look. "Don't," she said. "She doesn't know us." That night, as we lay in bed, her fingers traced the outline of a scar on my shoulder, one I got in college, long before she and I ever crossed wires. "I used to think love had to come with fireworks," she whispered. "And now? Now I think it's quiet. It's showing up when it's inconvenient. Choosing someone when the world tells you not to." I looked at her, saw the honesty in her eyes. The tired strength. "You think we're strong enough for this?" She nodded. "I know we are. That same week, I got a call from one of my clients. Big account. Long term. He said, bluntly, your personal drama's becoming a liability. I told him I understood. I didn't fight. I was tired of fighting for people who only showed up when things were clean and easy. Claire was waiting for me when I got home. She could see it in my face. Another one? She asked. I nodded. She didn't try to cheer me up, just pulled me in and held me tight. Later that night, I wrote a letter. Not to Emily, not to the firm, to myself. It wasn't long, just a few lines. You're not who they say you are. You stayed loyal until loyalty became self-betrayal. You chose love, even when it was complicated. Don't let shame rewrite your story. I folded it and tucked it into the drawer of my nightstand. Claire found it a few days later. She didn't say anything about it. But that night, she kissed me different. Slower. Deeper. Like someone saying thank you without words. We weren't pretending the world wasn't watching. We just decided to stop caring. Let them talk. Let them twist it. We knew the truth. And for now, that was enough. We didn't break up over one big thing. No scandal. No shouting. No broken plates or dramatic exits. It unraveled quietly, like a thread pulled slowly from a favorite sweater, unnoticed until the whole thing started falling apart in your hands. It started with a pause between kisses, a hesitation when she laughed, a distance I couldn't measure in inches but felt every time she looked at me just a second too long before looking away. We were both tired. The world had picked at us for weeks. Friends had chosen sides. Her parents stopped speaking to her. My firm had moved on. My identity, once so carefully curated, now felt like a used suit that no longer fit. And one night, as we sat on the couch, her knees tucked under her, the silence between us felt louder than anything we'd said all day. Can I ask you something? She said, not looking at me. Of course. She hesitated. Do you ever wonder if we're just trauma bonded? I turned. Claire, I'm serious, she interrupted. What if we're not actually meant for each other? What if we're just clinging to the first safe thing we found after everything blew up? I didn't know how to answer, because I had wondered, hadn't said it aloud, but I'd thought it. In the quiet moments. In the moments when I missed who I used to be more than I missed who I used to love. She looked at me, eyes wet but defiant. I don't want this to be built on pain. I don't want to be your rebound. You're not. Then why do we feel stuck? I exhaled, long and low. Because we've been surviving, not building. She nodded. Exactly. She stood, arms crossed, pacing lightly across the living room. I need to know what this is without the noise, she said. Without Emily in the background. Without guilt and whispers and people waiting to see us crash. So what are you saying? I'm saying I need space. The words landed like a slow bleed. Not sudden, not fatal, but deep. For how long? She shook her head. I don't know. I stood too. Not out of anger. Just to be on her level. Claire, I love you. I love you too, she whispered. But that doesn't mean we're ready. Silence. Just that awful, hovering space where nothing lives and everything hurts. I'll go to my sister's place, she said. The other one. Charlotte. She said I could crash. You don't have to leave. I do. She kissed me once before she left. Soft. Lingering. Like she was afraid it might be the last one. And just like that, she was gone. The days that followed were gray. Literally and figuratively. Clouds hung over the city, soaking sidewalks and window panes, like the weather was mourning us too. I didn't text her. She didn't text me. We didn't have a fight to repair. No betrayal to process. Just space. That made it harder. You can't fix silence. You can only wait it out. I filled my time with nothing. Sat on the porch watching the rain. Started a book I didn't finish. Rearranged the living room furniture just to feel like something had changed. Then came the worst part. I started thinking about Emily. Not out of longing, but out of curiosity. Was this how she felt toward the end? That dull, aching sense that even love couldn't fix the holes that had formed? Had she looked at me and seen a memory instead of a partner? I hated that I understood her better now. Claire called 4 days later. Her voice was quiet. Hey, she said. Hey. I didn't call to fix anything, she added quickly. I thought about you. I didn't say anything. I miss you, she said. But I still don't have the answers. I'm not asking for them. I know. A pause. Then she said the one thing I hadn't expected. Maybe we weren't supposed to be permanent. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. But she was being honest. That's who she was. and that's why I couldn't hate her for saying it. Maybe not, I replied quietly. She sniffed. I'm sorry. Me too. That was the end of the call. Not the end of us. But something had shifted. We were no longer walking side by side. We were in different rooms of the same burning house, unsure whether to stay and rebuild or let it fall. That night, I opened the drawer next to my bed and reread the letter I'd written to myself. You're not who they say you are. You stayed loyal until loyalty became self-betrayal. You chose love, even when it was complicated. Don't let shame rewrite your story. I read it again, and then I set it down and whispered something I hadn't said out loud until now. I deserve something that doesn't feel like drowning. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe space was what we needed. Or maybe she was just saying goodbye the only way she knew how. Either way, I had to be okay with it. Even if I wasn't. I didn't sleep the night before the mediation. Too many ghosts in the room. Emily's voice. Claire's silence. My own thoughts spiraling like static in my skull. I kept rehearsing conversations that had already happened, rewriting endings I had no power to change. When the sun rose, I stood by the window with a cup of coffee gone cold, watching the street wake up. Cars. Joggers. A couple walking a golden retriever. Normalcy. It felt like another planet. The mediation was scheduled for 10 a.m. in a neutral office suite with frosted glass walls and fake plants meant to make broken promises feel less sterile. I arrived early. Emily arrived on time. She was dressed like she always was, perfect. Clean lines. Minimal makeup. Her hair pulled back like it was a press conference, not the final page of a marriage. We didn't say hello, just nodded. The mediator, a kind, soft-voiced woman named Deborah, walked us through the agenda. Debts. Property. The cabin. Assets. Emily was generous. Strategic, but generous. Like she wanted to end things with a final check mark, not a drawn-out war. It was clinical. Fast. And then Deborah asked, gently, would you like to share anything before we finalize and file? Emily looked at me. For a second, I saw the woman I married. Before the distance, before the half-truths, before the resentment curdled. I thought, she began slowly, this would feel like relief. It doesn't. She shook her head. It feels like admitting I failed. You didn't fail, I said. We both stopped trying. She looked down, fiddling with the corner of her folder. I wasn't kind to you, she said. No, you weren't. Silence. I kept waiting for you to leave, she continued. And when you didn't, I stopped respecting you for staying. That hit like a punch to the gut, but it was honest. I could respect that now. I stayed because I loved you, I said, even when you made it hard. She nodded, and I stopped because I didn't want to be needed anymore. Not by you. We signed the papers. Simple, quiet, final. Afterward, she lingered in the hallway as I collected my coat. You and Claire, she said, her voice flatter now. What about us? Just don't make the same mistake again. Don't stay out of obligation. I won't, I said, but I'm not sure she's coming back. Emily tilted her head. She's always been braver than me. If she left, it's because she needed to find something bigger than survival. And then she walked away. No hugs. No drama.